Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and we finally got to test some raids in Dragonflight, and today we're going to be talking about Evoker and how it feels. Is it fun to play the new healing class in the next expansion? Now keep in mind, a lot of this video includes me playing Evoker and pressing all the buttons and seeing what sticks. There's a lot of field crafting here. Right now, I'm not trying to give you the best build, the best playstyle. I'm just trying to decide what playstyle I enjoyed, what was fun about Evoker, how did the range feel in the new heroic raid testing. Keep in mind, it is heroic raid testing. There's only 2 bosses. A lot of them were semi-stacked, especially the second boss. They promoted stacking. So it really, how do I say, the range limitations of Evoker were not really felt, especially in larger groups or groups who are doing the second boss in testing, because again, there's a lot of stacking. But I was honestly pleasantly surprised about how fun Evoker felt. I might even say that Evoker is more fun, or at least it is more intriguing to play in raid environment than it is in Mythic Plus, because I think a lot of the abilities that Evoker has fits that raiding environment more than it does in like smaller groups. And I'm mainly talking about Temporal Anomaly. I'll kind of talk about this. If you're not sure, we'll kind of look at the talent builds and things like that. So before we're gonna talk about the playstyle, before we're gonna talk about what I enjoyed and things like that, let's look at the talent build. Let's look at what I was trying, because keep in mind, I was doing multiple different builds. There are quite a few builds available for Evoker right now. There's quite a few builds that are working that you can play around, but let's see what I was doing. The first thing that you have to remember is that Evoker now has 30 yards. It used to be 25, now it's 30, so Blizzard has kind of listened to the feedback of players in terms of the range limitations. I'm not still sold on the range, the 30 yards. I still think it could be increased a bit more, but honestly, again, I mentioned at the start of the video, testing the 2 bosses, the range wasn't that big of an issue because there was a lot of stacking, especially on the second boss. And the build that I was trying out at the start, I was trying out multiple different builds. At the start, I was trying out the Emerald Blossom, Floating Seedlings, Field of Dreams, Circle of Life, Bountiful Bloom, everything to do with this ability right here. So this is like a Wild Mushroom Reflections type of combination. And again, it requires you to, or the group to be somewhat stacked, and there needs to be some sort of damage. And this ability, again, it costs 3 essences, so you are limited by essences. And I was trying this build and it was working okay. I was getting decent numbers. It felt, again, you have to keep in mind, there's so much overhealing, especially in the group that we're running with. There was a lot of healers, there was a lot of evokers, there was not a lot of damage on the first boss, so the overhealing was crazy. And this is why this build wasn't, it was okay-ish. The main thing about this build, or the thing that I noticed, is that Temporal Anomaly is absolutely insanely powerful, especially on bosses where there's not a lot of damage. So what is Temporal Anomaly? Why is it so powerful? The fact that you can use this ability, which is, again, is you shoot out an orb, and this orb is going to apply an absorb by default, and it also is going to apply echoes if you spec into Resonating Sphere. So you can apply echoes on people, you can apply absorbs on people, and then you can proc your echoes with something like Spirit Bloom, or if Spirit Bloom is on cooldown or whatever, you might apply it with the Dream Breath. So this kind of playstyle, how do I say it? There was a lot of people, a lot of the logs that I checked out, a lot of the information, a lot of people were running Temporal Anomaly build where they would spam Temporal Anomaly, get the absorbs, and they would do a bunch of healing because they would proc echoes by using their other abilities. And this was really, really powerful, except for the fact that Temporal Anomaly is absolutely giga expensive. It's like 20,000 mana to cast this ability, or close to. So you will run out of mana. But the thing is, again, we go back to our talents and things like that. The thing with Temporal Anomaly, it doesn't cost any essences. You can see the essences that I have right now. So it costs a bunch of mana, but, and this is the mistake that I did on the second boss, I was pressing a bunch of buttons, I wasn't sure what was going on, I was trying to use all my empowered abilities and things like that, and I was running out of mana. I was casting Temporal Anomalies, I was casting Blossoms too much. I was running out of mana, and I felt that for any fight that is quite long or requires a lot of healing, you will have to spec into things like Energy Loop. And I think this is one of the good things about Preservation Evoker. DPS, or doing DPS abilities, is going to give you something in return. And this comes in the form of many different abilities, things like Life Giver's Flame. Fire Breath heals nearby injured allies for 80% of damage done. And this felt, every time I would use my Fire Breath, again, for the people who don't know, I would use my DPS ability, I would heal people. On top of that, if you're speccing into something like Leaping Flames, you can use your Living Flames on healing members, and it's going to cast or splash heal. I really like the fact that you can DPS and you feel like you're getting rewarded for it. So On longer fights, I absolutely would go into Energy Loop, which means that Disintegrate deals 20% more damage and generates mana. Now, Disintegrate is an essence ability that costs 3 essences and costs no mana whatsoever. So, you are basically getting free mana for the cost of 3 essences. So, throughout the fights and throughout the raid testing, you're doing your healing. You're probably pressing Temporal Anomaly because it's so strong right now. The absorbs are so strong on low healing fight. It is somewhat brainless. It almost feels like cheating when using Temporal Anomaly, but I'm not sure if that's going to be nerfed or changed in some way, because there were some logs that I looked into where they were just spamming Temporal Anomaly and they were just using Disintegrate to get the mana back. So they would spam Temporal Anomaly, proc the echoes by using one empowered ability or something like that, and then it would go back to this Disintegrate spam. But I talked about the fact that you are rewarded for doing DPS, and I think that's really, really cool. The fact that you can use your Disintegrate 3 essence ability in order to get mana back when there's no healing needed feels really, really, really interesting, honestly. I think every healer should have some sort of ability like that where you're rewarded for dealing damage and you get something out of it, because sometimes dealing damage for no return in terms of healing can feel pretty iffy. So, my overall experience of Evoker felt pretty good. I did think the Temporal Anomaly feels a little bit too strong in terms of the absorb, but that's probably, it's kind of highlighted by the fact we're doing heroic bosses. It's probably going to feel a lot different when you're starting doing mythic raid bosses. On top of the fact that the range limitations, how do I say, there were a couple of moments where I'm casting my Spirit Bloom and I'm like, please stay in range, because the empowered abilities do feel really, really long. And this is where I want to go onto the statement that I said at the start. I felt Preservation Evoker was more suited to raid than Mythic Plus, and the reasons why, it's the empowered abilities. And again, a lot of the 2 bosses that we tested, there was like, hey, people are getting this debuff, or there's going to be a big AoE ability happening in the next 5 or 10 seconds, prepare. So there was a lot of time to ramp up, and I think Evoker is pretty good at ramping up. You can use things like Temporal Anomaly, which is going to provide absorbs on people, and then it's going to apply echoes. And then you can look into using your empowered abilities. And empowered abilities, the cast time is really, really long if you want to get the max value out of it. So you have to almost preemptively do it, because if you use it later or when the damage happens, especially with a lot of healers, there's a high chance you're going to be sniped. So there's a lot of kind of skill involved to this, and I really, really kind of enjoyed about timing your empowered abilities at the right time. And I thought it was very interesting, demanding, and difficult. But that also equates for me in being more fun. And now if we go back to some of the talent choices that I kind of wanted to experiment with, again, you do have things like Call of Ysera, where Verdant Embrace increases the healing of your next Dream Breath. And Verdant Embrace is basically Rescue. Verdant Embrace name changed from Rescue to this, and it's now usable on yourself. So you can do things like, or prepare for damage in terms of, you can use Verdant Embrace and then you can use on yourself. You can use Verdant Embrace on yourself now, and you can get this buff, and you can use Dream Breath, which is going to be more powerful. And there's ways of optimizing this. For example, you might be, again, I felt like for a lot of the ramps, you'll be using Temporal Anomaly, and then you're going to try and proc it, like with Spirit Bloom or something like that, because Spirit Bloom is very strong in terms of the healing that it does per target. It's very, very, very strong. But if that's on cooldown, you might be using something like Dream Breath, especially if you have your Verdant Embrace buff on it. Again, I'm not saying this is the best way to play. This is something that I experimented with. And keep in mind that there's still a lot of time for spell changes. There's still a lot of time for buffs, nerfs, and things like that. I was just pressing buttons and seeing what sticks most of the time. And I was pleasantly surprised how Evoker felt. I honestly did not expect this. I really didn't, because the preemptive playstyle, again, how do I say it? There is going to be certain builds where you see damage and you heal. But there is a preemptive playstyle to this. There is almost like Discipline Priest, Apply Atonements type of playstyle with echoes, and that involves Temporal Anomaly. In terms of mobility, you're an extremely mobile healer. You have hover, you have there's a lot of abilities you can use. You can cast heals while on hover. You can't cast empowered abilities, but you can still cast heals, which felt pretty interesting. And if you go back to the talents again, I haven't even talked about stasis and things like that. This is the first build that I ran. And then after that, I kind of swapped away from Circle of Life because I felt it wasn't. Again, I need to look at more logs, but I didn't think it was all that strong. I swapped away to Stasis, and Stasis is another Cloudburst plus Convoke the Spirits combination where you can input, I was trying different combinations. I felt like, imagine having Stasis and putting in 3 Temporal Anomalies in it, or maybe different combinations into it, and then all of a sudden you shoot out these orbs. Just to showcase just an example of what it could look like if you empowered Stasis, you can use a Temporal Anomaly. And again, we talked about Temporal Anomaly. It's something that is bread and butter right now in these heroic grade dungeons or heroic grade testing, because the absorb is just really, really strong. So you can see the little icon over it. It has a charge, it has a second charge, and then you can see temporal anomaly cooldown is very, very short, but the mana cost is insane. But once you have 3 of them, let's say the damage comes out, or there's going to be big AoE damage, and you just press your stasis. You shoot out all of these at the same time, and then you can use one of your abilities to proc the echoes that happen from it. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying this is going to be a rotation for stasis, because a lot of times when you activate stasis, you don't want to wait for that temporal anomaly cooldown, so you might fit in something else in the middle, because again, you just have dead time at this point. So I'm just trying to showcase the power of this ability, how fun it feels to build your, how to say, a combination of 3 spells. And I think this has a lot of potential in Mythic Plus, in Dungeons, and in Raid environment, especially when you're trying to anticipate for that burst AoE damage. Again, this is all field crafting right now, but this is just to showcase the depth of the class, because the class can be very difficult depending on which talents you choose and depending how you play. The fact that you have to micromanage your mana with things like Disintegrate feels really good. The fact that your DPS abilities can increase your healing also feels really exciting. There is going to be raid boss fights where there's going to be a lot of spreading. There is going to be certain encounters where you're going to, how do I say, you're going to have to work double as hard as Evoker, and I feel like the fact that you do have a lot of mobility helps with that, but your mobility is not like crazy overpowered. There's certain healers who have comparable mobility that Evoker has. The fact that you do have range limitations will feel bad on certain boss fights when we're doing more testing. I'm honestly really surprised about how much I enjoyed Evoker in raid testing. I really enjoyed a lot of the things that it provides. I do wish that the range would be increased even further, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. That's just my opinion. Again, I really want to know your opinions about Evoker. Have you tested it? I do think that, again, you can run into mana issues if you press buttons mindlessly like myself, which actually happened quite a bit if you don't have the Disintegrate talent. But overall, very pleasantly surprised, looking forward to more testing. I'm just trying to see how Evoker is going to feel on smaller raid groups where there's going to be more spreading, because I think that is going to be the Achilles heel of this class, at least at this given point. Cautiously optimistic so far. Keep in mind all of the talents and things that I showed in this video. Everything and anything can change. I'm just field crafting at the moment because I'm pressing buttons and seeing what's doing the most healing. There is going to be a bunch of, and I mean there's going to be a lot of spell tuning happening in the next week, so anything can and will change. Keep that in mind, and I'll see you in my next video.